Have you ever noticed how the world never really stays quiet anymore? Everywhere you go, there's noise. Cars honking, people talking, phones buzzing, screens flashing. It feels like silence has become a stranger. But when you finally find a moment where everything stops, something magical happens. You begin to hear not just the world, but yourself. That's where the true power of silence begins. Silence is not emptiness. It's a space filled with meaning, waiting to be understood. Think of the way a mother looks at her child without saying a word, and somehow the child understands everything. Love, protection, comfort, all hidden inside that one silent look. Or think of a teacher pausing after a deep question. That moment of quiet isn't confusion, it's invitation. It's space for thought, for reflection, for truth to rise. Silence speaks in ways that words can't even imagine. Sometimes the most powerful communication happens without sound. Imagine standing at a funeral where no one is talking. Just the wind blowing, people looking down, eyes filled with tears. No one says, "I'm sad," yet everyone feels it. That silence unites them more deeply than any speech could. Because silence doesn't just communicate, it connects souls. And yet silence can also test us. It can make us uncomfortable. We rush to fill it because it feels awkward. We talk just to escape it. But if you truly understand silence, you'll realize that it's not emptiness, it's awareness. When you stop speaking, you start noticing the sound of your heartbeat, the rhythm of your breath, the thoughts you've been avoiding. In those quiet seconds, the world slows down and the truth begins to whisper. Silence is also a mirror. It reflects who we really are when words are stripped away. When we stop performing, stop pretending, stop explaining, only then do we meet our real selves. That's why silence can be both peaceful and terrifying. Peaceful, because it brings calm. Terrifying, because it reveals what we've been running from. Have you ever sat beside someone you love, not saying a word, yet feeling completely understood? That's the beauty of shared silence. It's not empty. It's full of meaning. It says, "I'm here." It says, "I understand." It says everything words fail to say. Some of the most powerful relationships are built not through endless conversation, but through quiet presence. The ability to simply be with someone without needing to fill the space. In arguments too, silence can be stronger than shouting. The person who keeps calm, who doesn't raise their voice, who simply walks away, often leaves a deeper impact than the one who screams. Because silence shows control. It shows dignity. It says, "I don't need to prove my worth with noise." That's strength. Quiet, unshakable strength. Even in nature, silence holds meaning. Go into a forest at dawn before the birds start singing. The air feels alive, full of quiet expectation. It's as if the world is holding its breath, waiting for something beautiful to begin. That silence is not dead. It's alive, powerful, full of life. It reminds us that sometimes what isn't heard is more important than what is. In a world addicted to sound, silence becomes sacred. It teaches patience, awareness, and understanding. It tells us when to stop speaking and start listening. Because every person, every moment, and every emotion has its own silence. Some silences are soft, like comfort. Some are heavy, like sorrow. And some are peaceful, like acceptance. So, the next time you feel the urge to fill the air with words, pause. Let silence speak. Because silence doesn't need volume to be heard. It already has a voice of its own. A voice that reaches where words cannot. A voice that calms, heals, and sometimes even saves. There are moments in life when silence says what words never can. It doesn't need a voice. It doesn't need a sentence. It just exists, heavy in the air, sharp enough to pierce through lies and emotions. Think of a courtroom where the judge asks a question and the guilty man lowers his head instead of answering. That one moment of silence is louder than any confession. His lips are closed, but his silence screams the truth he can no longer hide. Silence has always been the most honest language. When someone stops talking to you, that silence often tells you what their words never did. You don't need to hear, "I'm angry" or "I'm hurt." You can feel it in the quiet distance, in the pauses that never used to be there. Silence in those moments becomes the final statement, the last paragraph in a story that no longer needs to be spoken. But silence doesn't always come from weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of strength. When someone chooses to walk away instead of fighting, When someone chooses calm instead of chaos, that's not surrender. That's control. Because silence has a discipline that anger never does. It allows you to rise above the noise and see what really matters. In relationships, silence can be the test that reveals everything. When two people sit in the same room without speaking, and it feels peaceful, that's love. But when the silence feels heavy, uncomfortable, full of unspoken pain, that's distance. It's the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, it warns. You can hide behind smiles and small talk, but silence always exposes the truth hiding between the lines. And yet, silence isn't always noble. It can also be cruel. When people witness something wrong, an injustice, a lie, a betrayal, and choose to say nothing, their silence becomes part of the problem. History has seen this too many times, when evil rises, not because of loud voices, but because of silent ones. The silence of good people gives strength to the wrong ones. So yes, silence can speak truth, but sometimes that truth is shameful. Still, there are times when silence saves you. When emotions run high, words can become weapons. In anger, people say things they don't mean, things that break hearts and destroy trust. In that moment, silence becomes your shield. It protects you from yourself. It gives you time to breathe, to think, to calm the storm inside before it hurts someone you love. A person who can stay silent in anger is not weak, they are wise. They understand that sometimes no reaction is the strongest reaction. Have you ever been in an argument where you decided not to answer back? The other person keeps shouting, trying to drag you into the fire, but your silence stays unshaken. Slowly, they run out of words, out of energy, out of excuses. That's when they realize that your silence wasn't ignorance, it was strength. That quiet dignity, that refusal to lower yourself to noise, speaks volumes about your power. Silence is also the language of grief. When someone you love leaves this world, there are no perfect words that can fill that emptiness. People try to say things like, "Stay strong," or "Time heals." But in truth, nothing helps more than someone who simply sits beside you in silence. No advice, no talk, just presence. That's when silence becomes sacred. It becomes love in its purest form, the kind that doesn't need to speak to be felt. And then there are those rare, beautiful moments where silence becomes connection. When you look into someone's eyes and both of you just know what the other is thinking. When the world fades and only the quiet between two hearts remains. That silence doesn't separate, it binds. It's the language of souls, not mouths. The real truth is, silence is never empty. It always says something. It can say, "I understand," or "I forgive," or "I'm done." It can say, "I'm hurting," or "I don't care," or "I love you too much to argue." But it always speaks the truth, because silence can't lie. Words can be twisted, but silence reveals what lies beneath them. So next time someone goes silent, don't rush to fill that space with noise. Listen. Pay attention to what that silence is saying. It might be a goodbye, or it might be an apology. It might be pain, or it might be peace. But whatever it is, it's real. And real things don't need to shout to be heard. Because in the end, silence doesn't compete with words. It completes them. It's the pause that gives words meaning. And when used wisely, silence becomes your greatest truth-teller. The kind that never lies, never shouts, but always speaks straight to the heart. In today's world, silence feels almost like a forgotten language. We live surrounded by endless sounds, notifications, conversations, music, engines, crowds. Every moment seems filled with noise, and yet, deep inside, many of us feel empty. Why? Because we've forgotten how to be silent. We fear it. We escape it. We hide from it. But silence is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It's the space where truth whispers, where the soul finally speaks after being ignored for too long. When was the last time you truly sat alone without your phone, without music, without distraction? Just you and your thoughts. For most people, that thought feels uncomfortable, because silence shows us everything we've been running away from. It brings out the feelings we push aside, the pain, the regrets, the confusion. But it also brings something beautiful, clarity. When the noise fades, your inner voice finally has room to speak. And that voice, though quiet, often carries the answers you've been searching for in the outside world. Learning to listen to silence is like learning to listen to yourself again. It's like meeting your heart after a long time apart. When you sit in stillness, your thoughts start to slow down. Your breathing becomes calm, and you begin to notice things you never did before. The sound of wind, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the peace that lives underneath the chaos. Silence isn't emptiness, it's full of hidden life. There's a reason wise people throughout history, thinkers, poets, monks, spent time in silence. They knew that wisdom doesn't always come through speaking, but through listening. The answers to life's hardest questions often rise quietly in moments when we finally stop talking and start feeling. Silence gives you the power to hear what words can't express, the intuition inside you, the quiet courage, the calm that helps you see things clearly. Even in relationships, silence has a special kind of healing power. When two people argue, words often become weapons. But when one person chooses silence, not as avoidance but as space, it changes everything. It allows time for emotions to cool, for perspective to grow. That moment of quiet can save a bond that angry words might have destroyed. Sometimes walking away to stay silent for a few minutes is not weakness, it's maturity. It says, I care enough not to say something I'll regret. Silence can also be the most beautiful form of love. Think of two old people sitting together on a porch saying nothing, just watching the sunset. They've spoken all their words years ago. Now their silence says everything: comfort, loyalty, understanding, the kind of peace that only grows when words are no longer needed. That's the language of deep connection, one that doesn't need sound to exist. But listening to silence doesn't only mean being quiet outside, it means being quiet inside too. Our minds are full of noise, what-ifs, worries, memories, future plans. True silence is when you can calm that storm and simply be. You don't have to do anything, fix anything, or prove anything. Just breathe. Just listen. That's when peace begins to grow, not from outside, but from within. And here's something powerful. Silence doesn't just heal the heart, it sharpens the mind. When you sit quietly and reflect, ideas come. Creativity flows. You start to see patterns, understand people better, make wiser choices. That's why the most successful people often value solitude. It's in those quiet hours that real insight is born. However, silence also teaches humility. It reminds you that you don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to fight every battle. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every argument needs your energy. Sometimes silence protects your dignity better than any clever words could. Because silence says, I know my worth, and I don't need noise to prove it. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about silence is how it connects us to something bigger. When you sit under the night sky, stars shining above, no sound but your own heartbeat, you feel small, yet peaceful. That's the moment you realize silence is not loneliness. It's connection to nature, to the universe, to God, to yourself. It's the space where gratitude grows quietly, reminding you that even without words, life is full of meaning. So, learn to listen to silence. Welcome it. Don't rush to fill it with meaningless talk or endless scrolling. Let it sit beside you like an old friend. Let it show you what really matters. Because silence doesn't need to shout. It teaches through presence. When words fail, silence takes over. And its voice, soft, invisible, yet deeply powerful, echoes in ways that no speech ever could. If you learn to hear it, silence will teach you peace, patience, understanding, and truth. It will remind you that sometimes the most beautiful conversations are the ones that happen without a single word.